the Xfinity Studios at WVON.
We're your original social media.
You're listening to Inspirational Perspective with Linal Harris on 1690, The Talk of Chicago.
If you wanna be about it, come on, let's talk about it. Change up the things you see. Open your mind to possibilities. Find your power, passion, and purpose. You know it's time for you to walk in greatness. Let's murder mediocrity. Clear your goals, live out your dreams. Right now. Inspirational perspective. Open your mind to a better life. It's time to live the dream.
Good morning, Chicago. You're listening to Inspirational Perspective. I'm your host, Linal Harris, your very own life coach right here on WVON 1690 AM, The Talk of Chicago. Inspirational Perspective on your radio is all about murdering mediocrity and living the best life possible. So as I ask you every Sunday morning, are you living the best life possible? And this is the place to be to explore that possibility. Well, good Sunday morning, first Sunday of the fourth quarter of 2020, October 4th. Excited to be with you all this morning. Feeling blessed to be with you all this morning. And man, I'm ready for an exciting topic today, one of my favorites, on how to leverage the power of continual learning. How to leverage the power of continual learning. All right, so this is your first time joining the show. Like, well, where does this come from? And where does this guy get his topics from? Well, we've been discussing Personal Development 101. How do we as adults develop, shift, change, and transform our lives? And I've identified 7 steps to personal development. And guess what? Today, we are on number 7. We're on number 7. So if you've missed previous shows, here's what you missed. Of course, you can go to YouTube and catch it at any time at Linal Harris. Just subscribe to the station there. And if you happen to like the content, be sure to hit the bell so you get a reminder. But step number one was create your life's vision. I don't care who you are and how you want to develop. But what's important is that you know where you're going, and only you can tell yourself where you're going. Of course, that's in alignment with your life's purpose that God has given us. But number 1, create your life's purpose. Number 2, then you must develop your self-discipline, because nothing else matters if you cannot keep your word to yourself. I like to say, that starts with doing small things first, like cleaning your room. And then number 3 is be self-motivated, not counting on anybody else, but ultimately learning how to count on yourself when it comes to your motivation and inspiration. Number 4 is be courageously curious. You might say, well, Linal, why courageously curious? Because it takes courage to question yourself and to question the things that you thought you knew. And that's what personal development is all about. If we're going to get better, that means that there are old structures that did not work for us that often we're married to, that we have to be willing to let go. We have to be willing to question, and that takes courage. So number 4, be courageously curious. Number 5 is leveraging mentorship and coaching. And I talked about virtual mentorship in that one. And man, thank God for mentors, thank God for coaches, because I know my life would not be what it is today without the support of others. My coaches, my previous coaches, my current coaches, my previous mentors, and my current mentors. And number 6 is develop your confidence, belief, and faith. Because in the end, no matter what it is, you have to believe that you can. You have to believe that you can. And today, continual learning. Because once you think you got it, you got to keep learning. And we're going to talk about that. And I want to talk about why I believe continual learning is such a, it's so difficult for so many of us. And so in today's show, I'm excited because we're going to look at continual learning from a number of different angles and aspects. And the first is, I want to talk about the 7 things continual learners should study. So if you're a continual learner out there, you're listening right now, here it is. I'm going to cover the 7 things that you should always be studying. But we're also going to talk about, I'm going to share 7 books that helped me navigate corporate America. I'm going to share a little bit about my corporate America experience and why I believe as a young African American man, I experienced the success that I did. It was not without continual learning, though. Man, I was constantly pouring myself into new books, new ways of thinking to navigate the jungle, the concrete jungle of corporate America, because it is a jungle. What's up, Rashad?
Hey, do you think it's hard to learn when you're old or when you're young? Like what age?
I think that both age segments have their, in many ways have their challenges. I think younger people, you typically are distracted. I know when I was young, I was completely distracted. And so in terms of applying myself to learning in my early 20s, well, I'll say my late teens and early 20s, I just wasn't there. You know, the intellect was there, but the ability to focus was not there, right? And then I think on the flip side, for many adults, and we'll talk about this later, I believe that many of us believe our learning is done, right? Or, hey, I've gone to school, I've gotten the bachelor's degree, I've gotten a master's degree, hey, I even got a doctorate. I've heard people say, I never want to pick up another book again. And I'm thinking like, no, you just started. So we'll talk about that too, because I think sometimes as adults, we feel like we're done, when really the race for learning has just begun, like just truly begun, because at a minimum as an adult, you have a framework you can work off of, like you have a foundation you can work off, but the real building has not been built. And we're going to be talking about that too. Great question. Thanks, Rashad. By the way, big ups to Rashad. Always gets us started on Sunday mornings as the technical producer here. So thank you, sir. The other thing I want to talk about are the 8 modes of learning. Most of us know the 4 modes of learning. But what are the 8 modes of learning? And so we'll talk about that. I'll be sharing 4 tips for economic success. One of them, guess what it is? Continual learning. And I'm going to talk about also why we avoid learning during uncertainty. Many of us right now, man, like, and let's say more so at the beginning of the year when things were incredibly uncertain, that instability typically pushes us towards places where we feel comfortable, and taking in brand new information is not necessarily one of those places. We'll talk about why that is. And of course, end with why continual learning matters. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Stay tuned. I'm telling you, this is one of those shows you do not want to miss. All right, so what are the top 7 things that we should be studying if we're continual learners? if I'm a continual learner, what are the top 7 things that I should keep in the back of my mind that I need to always be in some way leveling up my knowledge? How can I learn more? Well, grab your pen. I'm going to share them with you. Number 1, we should always be learning more about the human body. This is the one gift that you have. This is the most precious gift that you have. Study health and well-being. Study your health and well-being. Don't let aches and pains and headaches and like just these nagging things that sometimes come across us as human beings be normal. Don't let that just be, oh well, I'm getting older, that happens. No. Be curious, right? If we go back to number 5, well, I actually think it's number 4, the courage to be curious. Be curious. Okay, why is this happening? Why is this happening, and what do I need to know about this? And continual learning in terms of health is incredibly important. I'm going to tell you something, man. I honestly believe that a lot of us, our IQ over time begins to decrease because we don't understand the body. We don't understand the impact of fatigue. I can go down a list. Continually learn about your body. That's number 1. Number 2, study love. If there's anything that I believe impacts the body and our well-being more, it's love and or the absence of love. And so study love. You should always be asking yourself, how do I love? How can I love more? How can I increase my capacity for love? How can I increase my capacity for receiving love? But study love. Number 3, study relational politics. I'm going to get into this later. But here's what I mean by relational politics. It's almost impossible to get anything done without other people. And so understanding how to powerfully navigate relationships, how to be intentional with your relationships, how to powerfully navigate your conversations, critical conversations, is going to take you further than you can ever go. If you believe that you're done learning, this right here will take a lifetime. And so if you feel like you know everything else from English, from language, linguistics, etymology to mathematics, you like, I got it, Linal. I don't need to know the rest. Then you know what? I bet you probably still need to study relational politics. Study that then. Because I don't care who you are, that relationships is one of those things that the better you get at it, the more that it keeps giving. On a personal level, professional level, every level. Study relational politics. Number 4, study success. Study success. And again, remember, when we talk success, I don't necessarily mean money. What I mean is, what does success look like for you? And being clear on what it looks like for you, and then taking the time to learn more about how you can get closer and closer to the goal for your life of whatever success may look like. Number 5, study wealth. And when I say study wealth, notice I didn't say study money. But what makes you happy? And what does wealth look like for you? And then whatever that is, you should constantly be learning about how to deepen and broaden your own experience of wealth in your life. Study wealth. Study spiritual wisdom is number 6. And then, and I think I don't have to explain that one. Maybe I should. All right, spiritual wisdom. I'm beginning to learn, man, this much. There's so much that we as human beings don't know about ourselves, including the power of our spirit. The fact that you're alive, the fact that you're breathing is always, every morning, an incredible miracle just happened. You're awakening. But how does that happen? And what is the power that drives you? And how can you harness that power to create what you intend to create in your life? Well, that's just one aspect of spiritual wisdom. Just one, right? And there are a plethora of aspects and angles to spiritual wisdom that can be studied. Study spiritual wisdom. Number 7, probably comes with no surprise. Study yourself. Who am I? Why am I here? Why am I alive? What is my purpose? What is my purpose? I saw somebody say, study love? Yes, study love. Your own capacity for love, your ability to receive love, your ability to give love. Study it. Get curious about it. Okay. So those are the 7 things that we as adults want to be continually learning. I'd love to hear if you guys have, you think of one that I missed that you believe is incredibly important. But I want to shift to why this conversation on continual learning is so important. And I believe that many of us are suffering in our lives because of a lack of knowledge. Because there's something that we don't know that in many ways I believe that we feel we should. Like I should know this, or I can navigate this. And we're not curious enough to get out there and actually say, well, you know what? I may not be clear on this one. And so as a result, I'm going to give myself to learning how I can navigate this better. When I was in corporate America, first let me say that my overall experience of corporate America from the beginning to the end was one of tension. I will say this, that I don't know that environment has a natural propensity for the health of human beings mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And that's my take. You could disagree, but it's my take. The reason why I say that is because the pervasive context that I experienced in corporate America, and if you experience something different, you let me know. But the pervasive context that I experienced in corporate America was you can never bring enough. You can never bring enough. And the context of the company itself is we can never make enough. We can never grow enough. We can never have enough customers. So it's this context, right, that corporate America has. There's never enough. And then if you're in corporate America long enough, right, what begins to happen is you begin to look at your own life through that context. Well, I don't have enough. I mean, how many of you listening right now, you feel like, hey, every year I give everything I have. And at a minimum, my boss tells me that I barely met the expectation. I barely met the expectation. Again, it's the context that I believe corporate America has, right? Now, there's some companies that are trying to shift their cultures or are successful in shifting their culture. But the thing they must fight, the thing they will have to fight is that context coming back into the company. That you aren't enough, there will never be enough. And by the way, ever ask for a raise? Multi-billion-dollar company, but there's not enough money for that. There's no money in the line item for that, right? So when I went into corporate America, I had an advantage, I would say, over most folks. And I would say the advantage was this. I went in, and this might sound weird, but I went in thinking I'm not enough. Now, the reason I went in thinking I'm not enough is because I didn't have a bachelor's degree. And so in many ways, I felt fortunate to be there. I've been struggling to look for a job, all over the place. I had gone from wiping down cars to customer rep at Kinko's, which is now FedEx Kinko's or FedEx. But I had taken these roles in corporate America that not in corporate America, but just in these other retail locations that I was trying to develop myself. So by the time I got into an entry level, I'm gonna talk more about this later. By the time I got into an entry level position in corporate America, I was just excited to be there. I was excited to be making that kind of money. And so when I say that kind of money, it wasn't that much. I think I was making $16 an hour at the time, which back in 2000 was, I guess, fairly significant, right? Okay, that was okay. And so I got into corporate America, and right away I realized that I didn't have what it took to navigate that arena. I mean, there's a lot coming at you very fast. And so next to my job was a Borders bookstore. And so I would go into that bookstore from time to time, and I would find books that I believe would help me navigate the landscape of corporate America. Now, this is something I've never done. I've never shared the top 7 books that helped me succeed in corporate America. And let me say this, there's a reason why. Because a couple of these books, in my opinion, can be used to highly manipulate people. And I never really know what people are going to do with that type of knowledge. And so I never want to be the person that provides the knowledge, if that makes sense. It's something I give to my clients once I've judged their character fairly well. And so when I say these books, one or two of them you might be like, wow, he read that and he used that. But let me tell you this. One of the mistakes I believe we make in navigating relationships is we don't study how manipulative and how evil people can be. And so because we don't understand the potential of that, then we don't understand how deep and dark the game can be. And I'm going to tell you something. It's the second book on my list. But this book gave me, continual learning and applying and studying the laws of this book gave me an upper hand in seeing manipulation and evil when it was coming at me. When it was coming at me, I was like, oh, I read about this. I believe that this particular situation is about to happen. And if I'm not careful, I'm going to be the one that falls into the hole. I'm going to be the one that's at the gallows, right? And so, but because I could see it early on from understanding how people operate when they're being manipulative, when they're being power hungry, it helped me succeed in corporate America. And I know many of you are doing all that you can to navigate that arena. And so I want to do now what I can to help you. Here are the 7 books for continual learners that, by the way, I studied. I didn't just read them. I studied during my time in corporate America. The first is Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. You guys know that. If you follow me, you know that. Number 2 is The 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. Now, I've never shared that one on the air before. And the reason why I've never shared that one on the air is because it's quite a bit to digest. The 48 Laws of Power, many of these laws are highly manipulative. But in learning how these laws were applied or are applied, I was able to see that type of manipulation coming at me. I was able to recognize it. I was able to pivot properly. And as a result, I experienced quite a bit of success in corporate America. Number 3 is The Prince by Machiavelli. Talk about the ability to navigate corporate politics. The Prince really helped me understand the power of relationship and how even if you have no power, building relationships with the right people and leveraging those relationships to persuade and influence people equates to power. And that's what The Prince taught me. And that's what really helped me navigate some of the tight spots I got in corporate America. The Art of War by Sun Tzu is another book Good to Great by Jim Collins. Emotional Intelligence by Dan. Let me say this about emotional intelligence. Whether you're in corporate America or not, Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman, it's by Daniel Goleman with a G, is by far one of the books I've read on my ability to adequately and powerfully navigate my emotional life. And navigate my emotional life with intention in terms of the outcome I'm looking for in my relationships, in my business, and with myself. Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman. And then number 7, again, incredibly powerful book, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. I have never given that list before. And so for you all, I'm sharing that because I felt like I would be leaving something on the table. We're going to talk about continual learning as adults. I would be leaving something incredibly powerful on the table in terms of how I've used books to take my life to the next level, to take my ability to navigate difficult arenas to the next level, and to take now as an entrepreneur my businesses and the work that I do for the good of people to the next level. All right, so I wanted to start with that. And there are books on everything, you guys. And reading them, I'm going to tell you something, and reading these books can save you money, can save you time, and they can change your life. I don't know how much time you spend reading, but if there's somewhere you're looking to go, we're having a conversation on continual learning. There's somewhere you're looking to go, something you're looking to achieve, man, it is always in a book. And the problem is we're so distracted now, man. It's so easy to move around, never pick up a book. And it's so easy to be entertained that often we don't find our entertainment in the pages of books that actually take us to the next level. Earlier this year, in terms of examples, I read The Pale Rider, How the Spanish Flu of 1918 Changed the World. And let me tell you something. Initially, I wasn't keen on reading this book. As a matter of fact, it had been on my list for quite some time. And I fast forwarded it on my list because of the impending pandemic. And I'm like, okay, this is about a pandemic. I want to know about a pandemic. And because we were facing the pandemic, I read it anyway. Now, here's the funny thing. Turns out the book was quite good, right? But not just that. It also turns out that this particular book equipped me mentally, emotionally, and intellectually for what we are now currently navigating. So I want you to write this down. Write this down. You don't have to like it to learn it. Let me say that one more time. You don't have to like it to learn it. And I think one of the biggest things we need to learn as adults, man, especially when it comes to continual learning, taking your life intentionally to the next level, is you're not going to like every subject. But it's not about liking it, but how does increasing my competence in this area impact my life? And how does learning this impact my life? Understanding that I don't have to like it to learn it. Learning how to think in many ways really means learning how to exercise some control over how and what we think. And it means being conscious and aware enough to choose what I'm going to pay attention to and choose how I'm going to construct meaning from that experience. If we cannot exercise this kind of choice in our adult lives, you're going to find yourself in even more trouble and misfortune than you have to. we have to keep learning. We have to keep learning. And today I'm going to share tips on how we can continue to learn and what we should focus on learning. So let me start with this. There's a funny story. I guess it's a humorous parable. And it's about two fish. And there are these two fish, and they're two young fish, and they're swimming along. And as they're swimming downstream, they happen to meet an older fish that's swimming upstream the other way. This older fish nods at them and says, "Morning, boys. How's the water?" The two young fish, they nod back, looking at him with a curious way, and they swim for a little further. And eventually one of them looks at the other and says, "What the hell is water?" The other fish shakes his fin and mumbles, "Who knows, stupid old fish." Now, we can dissect that story for the rest of the show. Okay? We can dissect that story for the rest of the show. But my biggest question is, why didn't they ask the old fish what water is? Hey, old fish, what's water? And I'm guessing that they didn't ask the old fish what water is because maybe they didn't want to look stupid. Maybe they didn't want to feel stupid. Maybe they didn't want to seem like they overall were stupid. So to avoid the appearance of stupid, they preferred to remain stupid. Now somebody's thinking like, "Oh man, Linal, stupid is such a powerful word. Why are you saying this on this Sunday morning?" Because stupid exists. And if we're going to talk about continual learning as adults, I believe that we got to start with the fact that some of us do stupid things. There's a cliche that says there are no stupid questions. And I think this cliche is powerful. And in terms of this parable of the fish, once again, there are no stupid questions. Now, we can get into all the reasons why they didn't know what water was and the older fish did. I imagine the older fish got caught one day, had a hook in his mouth, and got pulled out the water. And when he got pulled out the water, he began to suffocate. He said, "What is this?" And when he got put back in the water, he said, now this means something. And he values the water more than those who've never been out the water. And I think we can take that analogy to our lives in many ways, but I believe that's the power of mentorship right there. So first, let's cover how we learn. And by the way, this show is going to be more informational. I mean, if you're looking for sensation, today, I'm sorry. Sensation, inspiration, and motivation. But to end, when you're talking about personal development, I mean, there was a lot of motivation and inspiration in those first 6. But now, I mean, we've poured the foundation in many ways. And when you start building, this is how we got to build, you guys, in terms of continual learning. And these are the things I believe that we need to understand. And some of us, we already know them. Maybe we just need to be reminded. So how do we learn? What are the 4 common modalities of learning? Well, number 1, you have visual. 2 is auditory, right? Listening, which many of us are doing. Some of you guys are watching and listening, and you prefer to do that, likely because it lands differently for you. Like I'm holding up the number 2, it just lands differently for you when you see it. By the way, if you want to tune in and watch the live stream, you can do so on Facebook by going to my Facebook page at Linal Harris. Number 3 is reading and writing. I just talked about that. That's one of my preferred, along with visual. And number 4 is kinesthetic, which is, actually doing it, experiencing the learning with your hands. Now, other researchers insist that there are more modes of learning than that there are actually 8 learning styles. And And by the way, as I'm going through this, I want you to be thinking about, okay, what am I? What are my ways of learning? Because as adults, like if you want to in some ways hack the system, once you figure out your mode of learning, then that's the mode you want to continually learn in. So as I'm going through these, just ask yourself, what are yours? So here are the 8 learning styles. And by the way, everyone has a dominant learning style depending on the situation. But here are the 8. So number 1, you have visual learners. And I'm going to break these down, by the way. Visual learners. Number 2, you have aural learners. And I did mean to say aural, A-U-R-A-L, not oral. Aural learners. Number 3 is verbal learners. Number 4, social learners. Like we learn from social situations. We'll dive into it. Number 5, logical learners. Number 6, physical and tactile learners. Number 7, solitary learners. And number 8, naturalist learners. Okay, what are these? So let's go back to number 1. I think we get it, but a visual learner is someone who retains information more effectively with visual aids, pictures, images, film clips, colors, diagrams. They when they see things, that's when learning really takes off for them. Visual data that's presented in terms of a map, charts, graphs work very well for this type of person. If you're that person, you want to make sure that anybody who's teaching you or anything that you're learning has heavy visual content. So it's a learning hack, okay? Number 2, aural learners. Now, these are people who respond to sound, music. As a matter of fact, my son is an aural learner, okay? I mean, he responds to sound, music, recordings, rhymes, rhythms. Those things really catch his attention, okay? So we taught him how to spell his name by turning it into a song. And he got it, right? And they remember, these kind of people remember conversations very well. And music causes a very high emotional response in this type of person. As a matter of fact, these type of people typically remember lyrics, things like that. Aural learners. And by the way, like if you're an aural learner as an adult, man, and there's something you need to know, if I were you, I'd turn it into a song, I'd turn it into a rhyme. It'll stick with you. But this is, important for you to know about yourself. Then you have verbal learners. And verbal learners favor using words and linguistic skills. They like to use it in their speech and in their writing. These are your readers. Again, I'm a verbal learner, okay? These are your readers, your writers, people who are big on listening and big on speaking. These type of people like word games, poems, word puzzles, and rhymes, and are typically attracted to strong public speakers and themselves can be strong public speakers, verbal learners. Number 4 are social learners. And social learners process information by interacting and relating to other people. And they enjoy working with others and are typically strong collaborators and can turn into strong collaborative leaders. Number 5, you have logical learners. And logical learners favor using logic and reason. If you recall, last week we talked about how logic isn't faith. And when you go through if this, then that, that is simply logic, not faith. By the way, logical learners, one of the things you're going to have to watch for is trying to bring logic to the areas of your life that you should be practicing faith and trust. But they like to classify and categorize information to solve problems with numbers, and logical learners are especially good at analyzing cause and effect relationships. This happened because that happened. And then you have your solitary learners. These are people who like to work and learn by themselves and self-study. They like for it to be quiet. They like to be able to dive into that book and take notes, journal. without much disturbance. That's how they get into flow. And last but not least are naturalist learners, and they process information by working with and experiencing nature. And they learn by finding patterns in nature using scientific logic for understanding. All right, you're naturalist learners. So again, a good question to ask yourself and nail down to be a successful learner is, what kind of learner are you? Now, I believe, and I said this earlier, I believe that stupid is a choice. It may be a default choice, but it's a choice, not a condition. And I also believe that our education system today has failed a lot of people because it does not take into account the learning style of the student. Instead, what it does is it forces the student to learn in the way that it dictates. And if the student can't learn in that way, then they're labeled a slow learner, a disabled learner. Often this happens to a lot of children in our community because instead of being, let's say, a verbal learner, an auditory learner, they might be naturalist. They may need to put their hands on it. They may need to see patterns. And so what happens in our society today, if that's your child or if that's you, people say, oh, they're not that smart. And I firmly disagree with that because we all learn in different ways. And so one of the things I'm going to tell parents today, pay very close attention to the learning style and type of your child and guard them closely if you notice that they don't have the learning style or the learning type that in many ways our archaic education system dictates. Because when you put them into that system, what's going to happen is that teachers, so-called experts, are going to say, we're really sorry, Mr. So-and-so, but unfortunately, your daughter, your child, is someone we classify as a slow learner. Versus saying, we're sorry, Mr. So-and-so, but unfortunately, our archaic system that's dominated by a union has not changed in the 21st century. Therefore, we cannot accommodate your child's learning style, and we need to do better. They're not going to say that. And so I'm telling you all this morning that this is what's going on. And even as adults, many of us have gotten down on our ability to, thanks Pat, DJ Pat's in the studio, who by the way also is a teacher. He says they call them diverse learners. I'm with that, but here's what I don't like about the system is that diverse learners aren't necessarily always catered to, and that they need teachers like yourself who can identify it. And unfortunately, I believe that those are far and few between. So they're called diverse learners because they don't learn in the way that our archaic education system has been set up. You can tell I got a chip on my shoulder about it. And here's the thing, I didn't have a problem with the education system when I came through it. I was lucky that I was taught in a way that actually worked for me. But I get that it doesn't work for everybody. As a matter of fact, my brother, 13 months younger than me, learned differently, and my baby sister learned differently. And my baby sister is incredibly smart, but we're certain that if she had gone through the normal education process, she would not be where she is. And now she's incredibly successful, works for Ernst & Young, but she just wouldn't be there because she would be someone who would have been labeled as a disabled learner. And she's incredibly bright. But thank God for my mom, who identified that and found other ways to teach her. Parents, pay close attention to the learning types of your children. All right, when we come back, why learning for us as adults is incredibly important. The industrial age is over. The information age is coming to a close. What do we need to know as continual learners to navigate this new space? And what do we need to know as continual learners to continue to develop ourselves so that we go to the next level? We'll talk about that when we come back. You've been listening to Inspirational Perspective. I'm your host, Linal Harris, your very own life coach, right here on WVON 1690 AM, the talk of Chicago. Don't turn that dial. We'll be right back. Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. All right, man. So, a bit more of a
to help get business owners back on their feet and have important
straight at you
racism and injustice.
educational show.
Cameron and her friends plan to continue to sell bracelets and spread joy.
But I mean, how to leverage the power of continual learning, man. That's, I think, as adults, incredibly important for us. And when we come back, I'm going to take it a lot deeper. I actually didn't get as far as I thought I would. So we have to move fast too. All right, what questions do you guys have, if any? I think that's fairly straightforward, but what questions do you have? And here's the other thing. I said this before, but you know, in terms of, this is a straight at you kind of show when we talk about continual learning. We're gonna get into some good stuff here in a moment. But number one, what questions do you have? And number two, if you know someone that needs this, maybe they are struggling with how their child is being educated right now. Man, share this, tag them in it. I think this is incredibly important information that unfortunately is not talked about often. And so, as a matter of fact, I looked up continual learning on YouTube. There was, I mean, very little, if anything, there. And so, this is just something that is not talked about often for whatever reason. I'm gonna tell you why. We're now we're in a more of a sensational, kind of society, and so people are looking for views. They're looking for likes. And you talk about something like this. This is not necessarily going to get it right. So, who wants to talk to adults about taking learning to another level? Most adults don't even want to hear that, and so, it's just not out there. So share it. Okay. Let's see, man. Yeah, man. Institutions are restricted and don't allow a lot of deviation from the structure of the institution. One of the restrictions, though, Preston, is unions, man. It's been set up because in order to change how children are taught, that means that everything else has to change. And unfortunately, they don't want to do that work. It's about being comfortable, right? And so, what questions do you guys have? As always, let me see. If the children are already in school, do you change schools or add more learning at home? I think that you got to make that call, Pat. I think definitely you got to add more learning at home. If you can afford to put them in an institution that supports their learning style, teachers that really get the fact that they are what you call a quote unquote diverse learner, if you may, then maybe it's a different school. But I think you also have to constantly be reassuring that child, that hey, you're incredibly intelligent and brilliant, and they're just not teaching you in the way that you learn, and that's okay. And find ways for them to learn in a different way. That's right, Cass. If you keep people stupid, it's easier to control them. And unfortunately, there has been systemic dumbing down in this nation. Systemic. As a matter of fact, I put a post on Facebook, man, and I was just talking. It was real simple. By the way, if you have any other questions, just copy and paste them, because I try to scroll a bit, you guys, but I don't always see them all. And so copy and paste it at the bottom again if I missed it.
Hi, this is Kamala Harris, and I want to take
Let's see
a minute
here.
to tell you about my
Yeah, I don't see any others. So just copy and paste it at the bottom.
led the effort in the United
But
States to reform our sentencing laws and make our justice system system more fair.
Yeah, if you
Dick
keep people
Durbin
stupid, it's easy to
offers
control them.
fair sentencing
Man, I just lost
to
my thought that
reduce
fast, and this was a good one.
that disproportionately harms communities of color.
I lost it.
And when Cory Booker and I
That didn't
went
happen
to
often.
work reforming our policing laws,
Sorry
after
about
the
that.
death of George
It's a
Floyd,
good one, too.
we called on Dick Durbin to join us.
Let me see if it's something
Because
if
Dick Durbin
reading
is
these will
passionate
prompt my
about
mind.
justice. Joe
How do I
Biden
navigate virtual
is
learning during
Durbin's
COVID-19?
help
It's
to
not
get
my
our
learning
country
style at
back
all.
on
That's
track.
a good one.
The people of Illinois
So,
need
and I guess virtual training, by the way, most of it is auditory.
Kamala Harris asking you to vote for Dick
Most of it
Durbin.
is
Please make your
verbal
voice heard.
and some visual.
Matter so much. Thank you.
I would say find what work, like whatever. Number one, know what's yours, and then whatever's yours, begin to push yourself in that capacity. Reach out to people like me that teach. I mean, I would love to know, so I can properly support you. In terms of how I teach, in my workshops, I typically cover all 4 of the modalities of learning. Visual, so I have visual aids. I do lots of drawing. Of course, I'm talking the entire time, and just in activities, getting people involved. All the modalities of learning to really help people in terms of their personal development. Give me 1 second. This is loud.
I had no inkling that Christians would target me.
All right, but yeah, man. I would say first identify your learning style, and then share with people who you think will care in terms of what they're teaching. But that's important. I wish I could remember what I was about to say, man. It's one of those where it's like I probably should have just said it. All right, no other questions? Yeah, learning disabled. Yeah, compliance and mind control, no doubt. All right, so yeah, a lot of times teachers default to the style they're most comfortable with and then cannot reach all styles. That's true. I believe that. Man. So when we come back, I'm going to dive into how to really take your own continual learning to the next level. And so, Preston, this also may help the question that you had around yourself. Because in this environment, if you find that this learning doesn't work for you, then hopefully some of the things I share will support you. My mom said, if children are not being taught in their learning style, award their efforts. Don't put too much weight on their grades. Help them to understand that a subjective grade does not measure their intelligence. And hey, give her that advice. Can you name those 7 books again? Real quick, I will. Let's see here. Back up. The first one is Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Number 2 is The 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. Number 3 is The Prince by Machiavelli. Number 4 is The Art of War by Sun Tzu. Number 5 is Good to Great by Jim Collins. Number 6 is Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman. And number 7 is How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. Those books come with an asterisk, and I shared that earlier on in the show. So if you missed that, then come back and check that out. Man, I wonder if I'm going to finish this show. It might be a part 2 to this one. Can you cover physical and tactile learning? Yeah, so physical and tactile learning, these are people who have to, they learn best by using their hands, by actually being in the mix. And so telling them how to do something like, hey, when you get a nut and you get a screw it in, like telling them to do it may be confusing. But if you put it in front of them and you show them how to do it, and then you give them an opportunity to do it, pow, they get it. They are physical and tactile learners. Whereas someone else, and here's the problem, guys. Someone could be sitting next to them that's a verbal learner being like, well, come on, stupid, didn't you hear? But that's not how they learn, right? And so there's nothing stupid about them. They're brilliant people. They're highly intellectual. They can be very smart, but they're a physical learner. And that's how they need to learn. And this is one of the things that It just isn't talked about. And so as a result, we have brilliant people walking around thinking that they're not as smart as everybody else because they haven't figured out how to learn. So if you can tell, I got some passion about this. All right, let's see what else we got. Yeah, you're right, Miss Hayes. The only thing that matters is grades, not learning. I'm gonna talk about that a little bit. This fallacy of studying to memorize, because it's something else that I think has in many ways hurt our ability to learn as adults, because we learn to study and memorize, and so now that we're adults, we don't truly know how to learn. I'm gonna talk about that. All right. Coming back.
The talk of Chicago.
If you wanna be about it, come on, let's talk about it. Change up the things you see. Open your mind to possibility. Find your power, passion, and your purpose. You know it's time for you to walk in greatness. Let's murder mediocrity. Slay your goals, live out your dreams. Right now. Inspirational perspective. Open your mind to a better life. It's time to live your dream. Your purpose now. Inspirational perspective. Let's slay your goals, let your greatness flow. With inspirational perspective.
All right, we're back. You're listening to Inspirational Perspective. I'm your host, Linal Harris, your very own life coach, right here on WVON 1690 AM, the talk of Chicago. Today's topic, how to leverage the exponential power of continual learning. Great conversation with the Facebook crew over the break. By the way, if you'd like to watch this streaming live right here in the Xfinity studios of WVON, you can go to my Facebook page at Linal Harris and join the conversation and that community, phenomenal community of people that show up there every Sunday. All right, so I shared a lot of my personal resources for learning earlier in the show, how I navigated corporate America. Now I want to talk about some of the stories that really bring this to life. And I ended the show by saying the industrial age is over. And what that means is that the days of having a high school diploma and working a good $20 an hour job for 35 years, that's gone. That is dead. If you're waiting for it to come back, I hate to give you the news that it's not coming back. Most companies, most organizations, and this new landscape of how fast change comes about won't last 35 years for you to work for them. And so this economic recession fad of the 21st century, it isn't a fad, folks. It happened in 2001. It happened in 2008. We've seen it here in 2020. And if you notice, it's about a 10-year cycle. And I would say you can expect at a minimum to experience this type of thing every 10 years, if not less time in between as we move forward. So this is the new normal. We're entering a new age. The information age is here, but it's ending. And I've given speeches on this. We're entering a brand new age, which I believe is the age of robotics and artificial intelligence. It's here. If you're on social media right now, you are engaging with high levels of artificial intelligence already. Artificial intelligence is not just robots walking around and talking to us, but in many ways, it's right in our pockets and our smartphones. And it's having a profound impact on us. And if you're not continually learning as these things develop, What type of impact does it have on me? How can it negatively and positively impact my life? If you're not continually learning, you will become a victim, or in many ways a casualty, of these new technologies in this new era. And I believe the only way to ensure our success and economic prowess is that we have to keep our ear to the ground by recognizing these new digital and robotic trends. So how do we do that? Well, we stay curious and we embrace continual learning. So if I had to share my top tips for economic success in the 21st century, in this brand new era, right? The age of robots and artificial intelligence. Because I'm telling you guys, I believe the information age is over. I think it's done. 2020, it's over. Now, we're still, think about this, right? The industrial age ended in 1990. But there's still manufacturing in the world. There's still those type of things, right? There's still evidence of the industrial age among us. But it's just not the industrial age. Same thing with the information age, okay? There's still evidence of the information age. And one of the things that we're being hit with now, with the presence of artificial intelligence, is disinformation. So now we have to be careful on what information we're being fed, because that information is not always the correct or right information for us, or period. Okay? So here are my tips for economic success. Number one, surprise, surprise, never stop learning. Never stop learning. Number two, whether you're an entrepreneur or you work for someone else, you have to focus on doing work that is valuable to your organization. You have to constantly be reevaluating the value of the work that you do. Let me tell you something. At this point, I'm going to say this, somebody might get mad. But at this point, based on the 7 topics, the 7 steps of personal development, if you're following those steps and you get a pink slip and you're surprised, you got to blame yourself. What I mean, like if you get laid off and you're surprised, you got to blame yourself. Folks, if you're doing this work, you will see it coming. You know what? I don't think my department's that valuable anymore. Man, we got this new technology. And you're constantly learning. You'll see it. You'll be able to navigate it. You'll even, in some ways, say, I need to get out this department and switch jobs. And this is the type of game that if you want to be successful moving forward, you've got to learn to play. Number 3, shift with technological trends. I'm going to talk about this more in a second. And then number 4, build strong working relationships and friendships. All right, let's go into number 1. I'm going to be quick. Never stop learning. So early on in my career, I started working for Allstate back in 2000. And this was my first foray into corporate America. I started working at Allstate. I had just graduated from Triton College with my associate's degree, and so that gave me a qualification to work. By the way, I didn't qualify to get on the phones. They're like, oh, you can't do that. By the way, they were making more money than me at the time. But what you can do, you have this competence with analytics. So we're going to make you a staffing and scheduling specialist, Mr. Harris. And we want you to help us identify how people should be scheduled and staffed. And so I came into Allstate, and this was my role. Now, mind you, back in 2000, call centers were fairly new. They had just been introduced in the late 90s. And so most people didn't know how to navigate that arena. And so I came in, not many people knew what they were doing. And so I began to realize right away that there was some opportunity if I took advantage of it. And here's what I mean by that. Where I was, most of the leaders had no clue what they were doing. They didn't. And I remember one day the director of the department coming in to where we sat and basically cussed out the supervisors of our department real good, because he had received so many faulty reports and so much faulty information. And so in that moment, I saw an opportunity. I said, okay, if nobody really knows what they're doing, if somebody figures out how to do it, they will be seen as valuable. And so that evening, I drove to the Borders bookstore. Back then, this call center was out in Woodridge, Illinois. Shout out to anybody that's listening that worked in that call center, because hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people did. And I drove to Borders bookstore. And I remember this day well because I went to the section in Borders bookstore where they had call center staffing and scheduling. And there were 13 books on the shelf. And I pulled each one out and I looked at it, and I noticed that each one had, slightly different content. And so I took one copy of each book and I took it to the register. And when I took it up to the register, it came to $201 and some change. I remember that because I knew it was going to be a lot. I didn't know it was going to be that much. When I say that much back then, I wasn't making much money. Okay. And based on my budget, if I were going to buy all 13 of these books in that moment, that meant that I wasn't going to be eating lunch for the rest of the week up until my paycheck. And I had a full tank of gas. I remember going through the process saying, okay, I think I can get these books. And so I bought them. And over the next 6 to 9 months, every evening when I came home from work, I would open one of those books and I would begin to journal what I was learning. Right? Continual learning. Now, mind you, I started entry level in this department back in 2000. And over the 6 to 9 months, I learned enough to make myself so valuable as a young man, right? I hadn't even turned 25 yet. That by the time I turned 25, which was in 2001, I believe 2001, they made me a supervisor. Or what they might call a lead in that department. By 2002, I had made myself so valuable from the 13 books, right? An investment of $201 in my learning, an investment of time in taking the information from those books and mapping it into my mind in ways that I could apply it in the workplace. And by 2002, I was a manager at Allstate's corporate headquarters. When I tell you that there's power and leverage in continual learning, I know it because this is how I've navigated most of my life. And I'm going to tell you something. It hasn't changed. Every time I see an opportunity, to this day, I invest in the resources to learn how to address that opportunity. Now, fast forward. I'm just giving you examples of my continual learning and how this has transformed my life. Fast forward, it's early 2012. My CEO and my CHRO at a different company, they appoint me to the role of Senior Director and Chief Diversity Strategist of the company. And at the time when they did this, I knew nothing. I knew nothing about diversity and inclusion. So, how did I get the role, you may ask? Well, one of the things I shared in my 4 tips for economic success is build strong working relationships and friendships. One of the things I had learned in my reading was the power of efficacy. And efficacy means to basically figure out how to make your effort the most effective. So any effort I give in a particular area, I'm making this effort the most effective for what I'm looking to complete. And I learned early on through reading that and conferences and continual learning that leveraging relationships and building relationships with people in power and making sure they understood who you were and how you operate was incredibly important. And so what I did is I built relationships with the CEO. I built relationships with the CHRO. And one of the things they noticed about me is that I was a continual learner. I was willing to research and learn things and then apply those things in the workplace. And so when they had this opportunity for diversity open up, they asked me to move into the role. Now, here's what happened. At the time of coming into the role, I knew nothing about being a diversity professional. Now, let me tell you something. Being African American is barely a qualification. And anybody who knows or is an expert in this field knows that. But with the power of continual learning, I was able to turn the company's diversity strategy around in less than a year. And after that was appointed the vice president and chief diversity officer of the company in May of the following year. How does this happen? Continual learning. Mind you, the first African American vice president and officer of the company, and the first vice president of the company that did not have a bachelor's degree. How does that happen? Continual learning. Now, let me say this. It's going to make some people mad. But believe it or not, the best learning doesn't always happen in a university. I said it. The best learning, now I'm not saying good learning doesn't happen in learning institutions, and I believe that we should take advantage of our learning institutions to the best of our capability and abilities. But often, the best learning happens outside those institutions, you guys. It happens in the dark corners of your home under a lamp with a book. It happens in your office, in your little workspace, in your bedroom, where you're watching a YouTube video or you're reading a book and you're journaling and you're taking notes and you're figuring out how to apply that knowledge in your life. That's where the best learning is happening. Now, I talk about what happened to me in terms of the opportunity I took in diversity. But what I didn't say is how I spent my evenings poring over white papers, how I spent my lunchtime meeting with successful chief diversity officers from other organizations in Chicago and across the country, and how any free time I had was spent reading books on diversity and inclusion. I looked at every resource I could find. Anything that I thought would help me figure out how to set up a solid diversity strategy that was actionable at a large company, I read, I researched. And thanks to Google, it wasn't that hard. All I had to do was be thirsty enough and disciplined enough to learn. Never stop learning, number one. Number two, do work that is valuable to the organization. Now, I want you to ask yourself right now, whether you're an entrepreneur or you work in corporate America. See, because this is the process of continual learning. And part of it is you have to constantly be surveying what's around you. Okay? And here's the question. Am I doing work that's meaningful? Some of us, we're so challenged in the workplace that, we get all stressed out. But if you're doing work that's meaningful, maybe you need to readjust how you feel. You're like, oh, it's so challenging here. But is it meaningful? Are you making a difference? Because if you are, then you just need to learn how to leverage the opportunity you have. If my boss had to lay off everyone on his team except for his top three, would I be in the top three? I want you to ask yourself that question right now. If you're an entrepreneur, ask yourself that question a different way. But right now, if you're working for somebody, I want you to ask yourself this question. If my boss had to lay off everyone on his or her team except for his top three, would I be in the top three? Would I be in the top three? And if not, what do you need to learn starting today to be in the top three? Oh, Linal, you don't understand, man. I'm so disenfranchised with that company. I'm telling you something. These companies are figuring out fast how to operate with less. You better wake up. You better wake up and take full control of your future. How do I become the top 1 in the top 3? That's what when I was in corporate America, I was always asking myself, how do I become? Now, first, am I in the top 3, right? And then if I'm like, yeah, they can't hold a candle to the work I do. Then I'm asking myself, okay, am I the top 1 in the top 3? If they eliminated my job today, would they miss me? See, some of us, we think we're getting over right now. Oh, I ain't doing that much, man. You don't even understand, man. This is great. This virtual environment, this is great. I'm going to tell you something. As a former leader in a corporate environment and as a current leader, as an entrepreneur, leaders are always aware of who's doing the work and who's not doing the work. Doesn't even matter if we're saying it. We know. And when the time comes to make the cuts, be sure you have to pay the piper. I'm letting you guys know. Number 2, do work that is valuable to your organization. Now, if you're an entrepreneur, ask those questions in a different way. Like right now, in terms of what I offer in Chicago, in my metro area, in my region, am I in the top 3? Like, I'm going to tell you something right now. Like, I'm not trying to just be a coach in Chicago. I've never been going for that. I wanted to be the number 1 coach in Chicago. And then get this. After I'm number 1 in Chicago, I'm going for the nation, right? So now I'm playing a national game. It's like, okay, in Chicago, if you don't know Linal Harris is one of the best life coaches, you're just not into coaching. Period. That's how I feel at this point. Now it's the nation. I need them to know that one of the top coaches in this nation, I do global work, that's next, but in the nation is Linal Harris. That's just my mindset. And if you're an entrepreneur, that's got to be your mindset. If you run a cleaning service, are you the top cleaning service in Chicago? If you run a bakery, do you have the best baked goods in Chicago? That should be your game. Because guess what? When people start asking themselves, does it make sense to buy this? If you got the best, it will. It will make sense. This is the best cookie I can buy. I don't have a lot of money, but for the few dollars I got, you make the best cookie, they going to buy your cookie. But if you making mediocre cookies, guess what? They going to walk right by. Y'all get my point. Number 3. This going to hit some folks, but I love you. You got to shift with technological trends, man. You got to, I know a lot of the listeners of WVON, you're listening right now, you're a little older, you've been giving yourself excuses. Let me tell you, I love you, and I'm telling you this with love. If you don't get caught up, you will be left behind. And nobody's going to reach back and get you. This is what's happening in the world right now with technology, and I'm saying it with love. Now, I've shared this before on the show, but I believe that this digital and technological revolution that we're currently undergoing is in the process right now of creating the largest wealth divide that we have ever seen. It's happening. Amazon has gotten more powerful, more wealthy. Zoom. I mean, I've watched the stock, right? By the way, this is what I was going to say to the Facebook folks. And I want to say this. I was talking about how AI works with social media. I put a post out on social media, and this kind of triggered my thought. I put a post out on social media, and here's what I said. I said, all you got to do is look at me to tell what I invest in, because I'm not just a customer. I'm also a shareholder. And then I had a picture. In the picture, I had an Apple computer. I own Apple shares. Okay, I'm not telling you what to invest in. I'm just telling you how I roll. Okay, I use Zoom in my business. So guess what? I'm not just a customer. I'm also a shareholder. I get on Facebook at least once or twice a day. I'm not just a user, I'm also a shareholder. Okay, I wear Nikes. I got on Nikes right now. Okay, I'm not just a customer, Pat. I'm a shareholder. Okay, man, now I put this post on Facebook. Do you know they slowed it down, bro? To this day, right now, that post got like 15 likes. 15 likes. Go look. Like, now, why would they slow that down? Why would they slow that down? Why don't they? Now, I didn't put last night, I put another post up, Woodrow Wilson. And I talked about how history repeats itself. And President Trump passed COVID-19. Woodrow Wilson caught the Spanish flu. Both of them played it down. And I'm like, history repeats itself. I didn't look at it this morning, but an hour later, it had 20 plus likes. All I'm saying is we got to wake up, man, to how this technology is working. If there's somebody you follow, you like what they got to say, you got to be intentional. Hit the bell. I want to know when they say what they say. Because the artificial intelligence is going to be like, nah, you don't need to hear that. We gotta wake up to how this stuff is going, man. Today, we'll scoff at the current economic divide between those that have a lot and those that have a little. And you think it's bad? Man, we keep ignoring technological shifts in our businesses, in our community, and the divide is going to get larger. And I'm telling you, if you don't hear anything else I say today, hear this. Please shift with technology. Please shift with technology. The rate of change is exponential. If you don't keep up, it's going to be hard to catch up. You have to make it your business to continually learn how technology is moving. Let me tell you this. This happened some time ago. I was giving a speech. In La Crosse, Wisconsin for SHRM, for human resource community. And during the speech, I basically said, pretty much what I just said. And I told those human resource executives, if you're not on Twitter, if you're not on Facebook, if you're not on LinkedIn, you will be left behind. I'm not mincing my words. I'm telling you what's going on. After the speech, people, they line up and they say, they acknowledge you. Thank you for what you said. There was a woman who came up and she stood in line. When she came up, she was like, I am terribly offended with you. I can't believe that you would tell us as professionals that we need to be on social media. I deplore social media. I'm offended that you even would suggest that I be on Twitter. And I just want you to know that as a quote unquote thought leader, that you shouldn't put those thoughts on us. I've been in HR for 25 years and I will be in HR longer, and I will do it without social media. Where's she at today in this virtual environment? I'm very curious. Where is she at right now? Well, what is she doing? And if she's trying to catch up, let me tell you something. Every 2 years or so, I'm invited out to this executive forum for executives who are looking for executive work, right? So these are people who've been in the role of vice president, chief something, and now they're out of work, okay? And they're trying to get back into the corporate arena as an executive. Many of them, they're at a point where they're like, hey, I may not be able to get back in. So typically you have franchises who are, they have tables at this event. McDonald's and places like that, because they know these people have investable cash. And they're like, hey, corporate America may not work for you. Open a Subway, open this, open that. Anyway, I speak at this thing, and every time I speak, all of them are caught off guard by what's happening in technology. Most of us don't even know that, man, if you apply for a job now and you don't have a Facebook a Facebook account, a Twitter account, a LinkedIn account, they might not even look at you. 95% of recruiters look on your social media. 95%. By the way, that's data from like 2013. It's 2020. That's old data. I'm guessing now it's probably like 97, 98%. Y'all get my drift. I love you. I do. But if you're not on social media, man, you can't stop it. And by the way, it's a time. No, it's a time warp. I'm gonna lose time. No, you got to be disciplined. Number 4, build strong working relationships. Okay. I want to talk about learning during uncertainty. I'm moving a little fast now because I want to finish this up. Our learning is influenced by our emotional state. And the average person's disappointment diminishes their desire to learn. And so when we think about disappointments are no more than a learning that proves that there's possibility. And I'm saying this because even now, there are many of us that we've navigated the uncertainty of the initial shelter in place / quarantine. It was scary. It was uncertain. We didn't know what was going to happen. You may look back on that time and you might say, man, Linal, I wish I had used that time differently. I wish I had used that time to learn a new skill. But here's the thing. One of the things that uncertainty drives is high emotion or volatile emotions. And we know that our learning is influenced by our emotional state. And so as we go into this winter, because we're about to move into more uncertainty, you guys. I mean, if you don't believe history repeats itself, I've talked about this if you listen to me. I've been saying that this is going to be a tough winter. I've been telling you guys this. COVID-19 cases are going up. It's likely that as it gets colder and more of us begin to sniffle from the common cold, more of us are sneezing. Not even the flu, right? But, every year, many of us will catch the flu. As these things begin to happen, we're likely going to be quarantined again, okay? I'm not a government expert. You don't take my word for it. I'm just telling you what I believe, okay? And during this period, things are going to feel uncertain again. How are you going to navigate that to make that period an opportunity for you to learn, to come out better? I talked about how life comes in cycles. How are you going to use what you learned in the first cycle to navigate the second cycle? As a matter of fact, I believe the Spanish flu of 1918 had 3 to 4 cycles. You guys, we're about to enter the second cycle. How are you going to navigate that? Here's what happens. The way the ego works, when I say the ego, ego, the ego causes us to individualize anything that happens that's unfortunate. So we begin to individualize it. And what happens is we begin to say, nobody else can understand my situation. If you experienced what I experienced, Linal, you would understand why I wasted so much time watching movies. And by the way, no judgment. Linal, if you understood what I went through, you would understand why I completely zoned out and just, began to play video games. You would understand. And by the way, this is an egoic conversation that you're having with yourself. Because the ego has a way of individualizing our unfortunate plight. And let me say this. Out of 7 billion people, almost 8 billion people on the planet, if for you to think that no one can understand your situation is absurd. For you to think that your individual situation is so bad that nobody else can get it out of 8 billion people, because we're almost there, 8 billion people on the planet, it's absolutely absurd. It's egoic. This is where we have to learn, talking about continual learning, to start taking full responsibility. There are only 2 ways to change your life. Before we go into this next cycle, I'm telling you what to do. Before we go into this next cycle, 2 ways. Begin surrounding yourself with people who influence you properly. People you can talk to. Hey, I'm struggling. Hey, they just laid me off. Whatever happens, people who positively influence you. Surround yourself with the right people. Start preparing yourself now for this cycle. Number 2, you're going to have to resolve that things are going to change from inside out. That nobody else can do for you. To have the command in these areas of life are incredibly important, and they have a great deal of influence on what you will learn. If you can't resolve within yourself who you're going to be, then you can't control your emotional state. And if you can't control your emotional state, that means that you are going to be unable to learn when the stakes are high. If you're not surrounded by the right people who can help you stabilize your emotional state, if you're not being influenced by people who can help you stabilize, you're not going to learn. See, here's the thing, and this is why other people in this cycle right now we're about to go through are going to be important. Who are your influencers? Who are the people that you call friends? Who are the people you surround yourself with? Can you count on them? Because innovation doesn't happen without collaboration. And I'm going to tell you, each cycle is going to require that we innovate. Like I look at my wife's business right now. Man, completely different than how she started this year. Man, she took a tremendous revenue hit when all this took on. I mean, I took about a 24% hit. She took a tremendous hit. Okay. Now, we both have bounced back. Her business looks very different from mine. I mean, mine still looks about the same, right? Few things, no live events, right? That got canceled. Few things happened. Hers, completely virtual. Innovation requires collaboration. Who are you collaborating with? Who are you talking to? You better get real intentional about that, because as we go into this next cycle, that's going to be the impetus for how you learn. And let me tell you something else. If you don't like people and you don't like change, you're going to like irrelevance even less. Now, when I am uncomfortable, when we are uncomfortable, it's likely we're uncomfortable because we're learning something. So the other thing is, are you able to extract the lessons? You know, some of us are still feeling intellectual entitlement due to going to college. Like we got, I have a doctorate degree. Man, I've actually heard someone say this before. Like, man, I read so many books. I said this early in the show. I mean, I read so many books for my doctorate, I'll never read again. I call that intellectual entitlement. Because I've learned so much, I don't need to learn anymore. I'm good. I've now become an expert and a specialist, and I'm good. I've read so much, I don't need to read anymore. How about this? Let me tell you this. Nah, man, your learning has just begun. Your learning has just begun. If you're going to be successful, you have to continue to invest in yourself and invest in your learning. Oh, you don't understand. I have hundreds of thousands of dollars in college debt. And for me, I promised myself I wouldn't spend another penny on learning I'm done. Okay. That means you're also done being successful. I'm not missing my words either. That's just what it is. Let me tell you something. Over 60% of people who graduated from college are not using their educations in their jobs, folks. 60%. That's an old number too. That was pre-pandemic. In college, this is how we learn. Like we learned to memorize things and study to pass a test. Not to apply it, but to pass a test. And then what happens is in life, we have to then shift to studying so we know how to apply and implement the knowledge that we gain. Most educated folk, I'm just going to say it, most really educated, formally educated folk don't know how to apply knowledge because they weren't taught application. They were taught memorization and testing. So now here you are all grown trying to figure out, why don't I apply these things? Because you weren't taught application. And that's what continual learning is all about. Now it's time to teach yourself application. Do you still study? Do you still study? What are you studying? And as you study, what intellectual obstacles do you face? You might say, well, Linal, what are you talking about? Like, let's talk about money. Is that one of your intellectual obstacles? How you doing with money? You got money? You got money put up? You set for retirement? You have an investment account? Do you have more than 5 figures in your checking account? Do you have more than 6 figures in your savings account? Have you saved enough to last for 6 months if you had to go without work? Is money one of your intellectual obstacles? See, here's the thing, man. This is what continual learning is all about. Because it doesn't have to stay that way. All you have to do is study and apply yourself. Continual learning. What about your love life? What about your relationships? Keep having the same problem? Well, there's a pill for that. It's called learning. It's called continual learning. What about your career? Oh man, I don't even know if this is the work I'm supposed to be doing. Well, there's a pill for that. It's called continual learning. What about your spiritual life? Oh, there's a pill for that. It's called continual learning. I can keep going. Continual learning, continual learning. Consider this. There are no other options to knowing how to read other than learning how to read. I'm going somewhere with this. Just listen to me. There are no other options for knowing how to read other than learning how to read. Okay? You might say, oh, well, Linal, what about audiobooks? Audiobooks are listening. That's not reading. And so until a person who cannot read learns to read, they will never read. There is no other option. So the same thing, until a person who doesn't know how to manage money learns how to manage money, they will never know how to manage money. Man, it's not like magic, folks. This is the power of continual learning. You can learn to do it. Remember earlier I said, you don't gotta like it to learn it. Well, I hate finance. I hate accounting, Linal. You don't gotta like it to learn it. What do you want to achieve in your life? Isn't your vision big enough where for you it's worth it? It's worth doing the work. It's worth turning off the television and opening the book. A real good one right now. My wife and I both. I've read it. My wife is reading it now. I Can Teach You to Be Rich. I think it's by Ramit Sethi. I might be getting it wrong. Babe, if you're listening, put it in for him. But I can teach you how to be rich. It's a real good book on finance. But you guess what? You got to do the work. You don't got to like it to learn it. What intellectual blind spots do you have? It's often what we think we know that keeps us from learning what we need to know. Oh, well, I know how to balance a checkbook and do those things. I just don't have time. I know how to do it. I just, I just don't take the time to do it. My finances could be better if I spent a little more time on it. My relationship could be better. I just, we're so busy. We often think we know. And that's what keeps us from learning what we need to know. 90% of people are pretending that they understand 90% of the time, often when the stakes are the highest. Say that one more time. 90% of the people, this is a human phenomenon, man. This is a psychological thing. 90% of the people are pretending they understand 90% of the time when the stakes are the highest. You know what I mean. You've been there before. Somebody's talking about something you have no clue about, and you're like, oh yeah. Like if you can't see me in the studio, I'm shaking my head like, oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, that's what you do? Oh. You have no idea what they're talking about. You have no idea. And just like the fish I talked about earlier, you get in your car, you're driving home, you ask your spouse, what's water? That's what you're swimming in. You got to get curious, folks. What do you get resistant to research? What have you learned? And how are you acting on that learning? If you're an entrepreneur, we got to get to failure fast, folks. Entrepreneurs know what that means. Know what it means to fail fast. Man, we all know what it means to roll out a product, put marketing behind the product, money behind the product, put it out. That didn't work. We know what it means to fail. We got to get to failure faster. For my entrepreneurs, check out my Facebook post later. I have 7 ways to stay competitive for entrepreneurs. I'm not going to cover it right now because I have 4 minutes. I want to close the show. Experts focus on learning. Experts focus on learning more about their expertise. Think about that. Experts focus on learning more about their expertise. What are you doing? Inventors focus on learning more about innovation. Where's your focus this morning? Are you learning? Let's keep learning. There's been more data produced in the last 2 years. I could probably say the last year now than has been produced in all time. Let me say that one more time. There's been more information, more data, more things to learn. More has been produced in the last 2 years than in all time. All time. You understand what that means? Like, this is how much information is available to us. And it's going to be important for all of us to understand. We'll never be able to absorb all the information that is at our fingertips via the internet, via social media, via TikTok, via Instagram, via Facebook. But here's the thing. If we can use the internet as a tool to become experts of our craft and experts of navigating ourselves, we can change our collective experience of the world because it's available to us. But the question is, will you take on the challenge to keep learning? Pablo Picasso has a quote. He says, "I'm always doing that which I cannot do in order that I may learn how to do it. There's another quote by Lillian Smith, and she says, when you stop learning, stop listening, and stop looking, and stop asking questions, always new questions, for you, then it is time to die. When we look at the greats, many of them, they had no formal education. Henry Ford, Abraham Lincoln, Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, the list goes on. What made them different? They never stopped learning. As we close, my big question to you: what will you learn today? You've been listening to Inspirational Perspective. I'm your host and life coach, Linal Harris, right here on WVON 1690 AM, the Talk of Chicago. Stay tuned for the Borges Report. And as always, God bless you and have a phenomenal week. Look forward to seeing you next week. Until then, have a great day. All right, guys, that's the show. Next week, we do the final wrap on Personal Development 101. I hope you enjoyed it.
I'm Mike Stevens.
If you did, please share the stream. Please be sure to go out to my other social media channels and like it, so you can catch this type of content throughout the week as well. And I look forward to seeing those of you who will join me tomorrow on the coaching webinar series. I look forward to seeing you there. Have a good day.